Some stories just feel like modern-day fables, don't they? They're tales of pride, prejudice, and promises that change absolutely everything. This is one of those stories, a narrative that has captured millions of hearts, where the underdog rises up and the arrogant are forced to see the world a little differently. It's the classic story of the powerful CEO and the overlooked worker. Now, this specific tale about a brilliant female CEO and a humble black mechanic has become a viral phenomenon. Of course, it's a fictional story, created to explore some powerful themes, but the lessons inside feel incredibly real. This is what happens when mockery collides with genius, and a sarcastic bet becomes a life-altering destiny. The air inside the billion-dollar laboratory of Sterling Dynamics was thick with failure. Engineers in lab coats that cost more than a car whispered in defeated little groups. At the center of it all, silent and defiant, sat the SDX-12 Hyper Thrust engine, a $4 billion paperweight. It was supposed to be a revolutionary clean energy engine, and it was completely dead. The company's formidable CEO, Isabella Sterling, scanned the room, her face a mask of cold fury. Her eyes swept past her top engineers and the panicked board members, finally landing on a man in a simple maintenance uniform pushing a cleaning cart. He had stopped, his gaze locked on the engine. A cruel, dismissive smile played on Isabella's lips. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger right at him. "You!" she called out, her voice dripping with a sarcasm that echoed through the vast room. "You look fascinated. Think you can fix the XJ-12 prototype?" The man, Elias Vance, simply met her gaze as the entire room held its breath. "Fine," Isabella laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You get that engine running," she announced to the stunned audience, "and I'll marry you." The laughter that followed Isabella's announcement was a wave of relief mixed with ridicule, and it was all aimed at one man. Elias Vance was suddenly the center of attention, standing alone in a sea of condescending smiles. He was a ghost in this machine, the man who cleaned the floors, emptied the trash, and stayed invisible to the brilliant minds shaping the future. To them, he wasn't a person. He was just part of the building. And now, he was the punchline to the CEO's cruel joke. Isabella Sterling didn't get to be CEO of a company like Sterling Dynamics by being kind. She had clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated industry with a razor-sharp mind and a will of steel. She was brilliant, ruthless, and had zero tolerance for failure. The SDX-12 engine was her legacy, the result of a decade of research and billions in investment. It was supposed to be a quantum leap in propulsion technology, but 2 weeks ago, during its final test, it had just died. The best engineers in the world, with PhDs from MIT and Caltech, couldn't figure it out. They ran terabytes of diagnostics and took it apart and put it back together again. The official diagnosis was catastrophic harmonic dissonance. In plain English, the engine was tearing itself apart with its own vibrations. A feedback loop so violent, its own safeguards had shut it down for good. No one knew how to break the loop. The company's stock was plummeting, and Isabella's throne was starting to wobble. So when she saw Elias Vance, the night shift janitor, looking at her $4 billion disaster with such intense focus, something in her just snapped. It was the audacity of it all. The janitor, in his grease-stained uniform, daring to have an opinion. Her challenge wasn't a joke. It was a weapon, meant to put him and everyone else back in their place. "Fix this engine, and I'll marry you." The words were absurd, a public spectacle, designed to humiliate him so completely he'd become invisible again. But Elias was used to being underestimated. He had a mechanical engineering degree from a state college, a diploma he kept folded in his wallet. He'd given up a promising career to come home and care for his ailing mother, taking a maintenance job at Sterling Dynamics because the night shift let him be with her during the day. For 3 years, he'd been a shadow, and he had listened. He heard the engineers arguing, he read schematics left on cafeteria tables, and he studied the machinery that was his true passion. He knew these engines. He'd even spotted a flaw in the SDX-12's design on paper months ago, a tiny oversight in the vibration dampening assembly. But who was going to listen to a janitor? Now, every eye was on him. The laughter died down into a tense silence. They were all waiting for him to shrink away and apologize. Isabella stood with her arms crossed, a predator enjoying the show. Her VP, a suck-up named Snyder, whispered in her ear, "Excellent move, Miss Sterling. A perfect lesson in corporate hierarchy." Elias didn't look at Isabella. He looked at the dead machine. He took a slow breath, wiped his hands on a clean rag from his cart, and met Isabella's icy gaze. "All right," Elias said, his voice calm and steady. "You've got a deal." A new shockwave hit the room. That wasn't the response anyone expected. It wasn't fear, it was acceptance. Snyder snorted. Isabella's smirk faltered. Did this man not understand humiliation? "Fine," she snapped, recovering. "The engine is yours. You have 24 hours. My entire board and the press will be here tomorrow at noon to witness your failure. When you can't do it," she added, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "security will show you the door. Permanently." Elias just nodded. He pushed his cleaning cart to the side and walked toward the $4 billion engine, the fate of a global corporation on his shoulders, with nothing but a sarcastic marriage proposal as his mission. The room watched, a mix of pity and morbid curiosity on their faces. They thought they were about to see a spectacular failure. What they were really about to see was the beginning of a revolution. The lab quickly turned into an arena for two, Elias Vance and the silent beast of an engine. The executives retreated to a glass-walled observation deck above, looking down like Romans watching a gladiator. Isabella stood at the front, whiskey in hand, ready to savor his defeat. "Look at him," Snyder sneered beside her. "He's just staring at it. Does he think he can fix it with his mind?" Down on the floor, Elias wasn't just staring, he was listening. His grandfather, who could rebuild a car engine by sound alone, taught him that every machine has a voice. You just have to be patient enough to hear it. He placed his hand on the cold casing, closed his eyes, and tried to feel the ghost of the vibrations that had killed it. His first move made everyone on the deck above chuckle. He didn't grab a high-tech scanner. He pulled an old-school mechanic's stethoscope from his cart. "A stethoscope!" Snyder howled. "Is he going to check its pulse?" But Isabella didn't laugh. She watched as Elias placed the stethoscope against the engine, tapping gently with his knuckle. He was mapping it, not by its schematics, but by its physical soul, listening for the echo of its fatal flaw. Hours melted away. Elias worked with a quiet, methodical grace. He moved like a surgeon, disassembling a small, seemingly insignificant panel the other engineers had ignored. Up on the deck, Isabella's contempt was slowly turning into a strange, unsettling curiosity. He wasn't fumbling or guessing. He was moving with unnerving purpose. "What is he doing?" she muttered to herself. Snyder, eager to please, got on his comms. "Dr. Aris," he barked at the lead engineer, "report. What is the janitor doing to my engine?" Down on the floor, Dr. Aris cautiously approached Elias. "Mr. Vance, the board would like to know what you're doing." Elias didn't look up. "This engine's problem isn't the quantum cascade," he said calmly. "That's a symptom. The problem is mechanical. The harmonic dissonance is a physical vibration. Your dampening array is misaligned." Aris scoffed. "That's impossible. We modeled the array 1,000 times." Elias finally looked up. "You modeled it for perfect conditions. You didn't account for the micro-expansion of the casing under a full energy load. There's a feedback loop filter that's supposed to compensate, but it's in the wrong place. It's actually amplifying the vibration." He pointed with a wrench. "It should be here, connected to the primary resonance manifold. You have it routed through a coolant regulator. It's fighting the very thing it's supposed to fix." A stunned silence fell over the engineering team listening in. What he said was both ridiculously simple and profoundly brilliant. It was a mistake you'd never see on a computer screen, only if you knew how to listen to the machine itself. Isabella heard it all from the deck, and her blood ran cold. It made perfect, terrifying sense. It was also a humiliating indictment of her entire R&D department. How could they all have missed it? As the night wore on, The mockery upstairs was replaced by a tense, grudging respect. Around 3 a.m., Isabella couldn't stand it anymore and went down to the lab floor. Elias was deep in the engine's guts, sweat beading on his forehead, his focus absolute. She had planned to say something dismissive, but the words caught in her throat. "You really think this is going to work?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. Elias paused and glanced at her. "It's not about what I think," he said. "It's about what the machine needs. People make things complicated with theory and ego. Machines are honest. They either work or they don't." The statement was a direct shot at her entire world of boardrooms and stock prices. For the first time, she saw him not as a janitor or a punchline, but as a man holding the future of her company in his greasy hands. Then she did something that shocked even herself. She walked to the high-end coffee machine, brewed a cup, and set it on his workbench. "Don't get any ideas," she said, her old sharpness returning, but without the usual bite. "You're still fired if this thing doesn't start." Elias looked at the coffee, then back at her, and a small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Yes, ma'am," he said. That smile wasn't subservient. It was knowing. It was the smile of a man who knew he was going to win. By 11 a.m., an hour before the deadline, he was done. The observation deck was packed with board members and tech journalists. They all thought they were there to witness a janitor get fired. Elias wiped his hands on a rag, looked up at the glass wall, and his eyes found Isabella's. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. The entire company, the entire industry, was holding its breath. A man who was once invisible was about to prove that genius can be found anywhere. His journey is a testament to the idea that respect has to be earned. If you believe in the power of the underdog and want to see more stories where humility and skill win the day, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And let us know in the comments, what do you think will happen when he flips that switch? Your support helps us bring these powerful narratives to life. Now, let's see what happens next. At exactly noon, Isabella Sterling stood before the press and her board, her face a perfect mask of corporate poise. Down on the lab floor, Elias stood beside the engine's main control console, looking small and out of place. "As you know," Isabella began, her voice booming over the PA system, "we have been facing a significant challenge with the SDX-12 prototype." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on Elias. "Yesterday, in a moment of corporate inspiration, I issued a challenge. A wager was made, a rather unconventional one." Her eyes narrowed as she looked at him. This was it, the moment of truth. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dripping with authority. "Proceed." Elias met her gaze one last time, then turned to the console and pressed the Ignition Sequence Start button. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Nothing. Snyder let out a triumphant sigh. A reporter started scribbling a headline. Isabella's heart sank. And then, a low hum began. It was a soft, pure tone. The hum grew steadily, a perfect chord of rising power. The lights on the console, red for 2 weeks, all flipped to a brilliant, steady green. Systems nominal. Harmonic resonance stable. Quantum cascade engaged. On the main display, the energy output meter shot past the previous record, past the theoretical maximum, and just kept going. The SDX-12 wasn't just working, it was perfect. The engine itself glowed with a soft blue light, its power a confident whisper. It was the sound of victory. The observation deck erupted. Engineers were shouting and crying. Board members were slapping each other on the back. In the middle of it all, Isabella stood frozen. Her mind, always 10 steps ahead, was utterly blank. The janitor hadn't just fixed her engine. He had perfected it. He had saved her company, and he had won the bet. The crowd's attention shifted from the engine to her. They were all thinking it. The bet. Fix this engine, and I'll marry you. What started as a taunt was now a public promise. The world was watching. She grabbed a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice shaking just a bit. "Today, Sterling Dynamics has witnessed a miracle of ingenuity, dedication, and unconventional genius." She descended to the lab floor, the crowd parting before her. She walked right up to Elias. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear and calm. He held all the power now, and they both knew it. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice quiet for his ears only. "You have embarrassed me. Not because you made me look small," she continued, "but because you showed me how small I was acting." It was the closest she could get to an apology. She turned back to the crowd. "As for my unconventional wager," she announced, "a promise is a promise." She faced Elias again as every camera zoomed in. To everyone's shock, she slowly, deliberately, got down on one knee. A collective gasp filled the room. Isabella Sterling, the Iron Queen of the corporate world, was kneeling before a janitor. "Elias Vance," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I was arrogant, I was prejudiced, and I was wrong. I made a promise in mockery, but I would like to honor it with sincerity." She took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" The room was dead silent. Elias looked down at the powerful CEO kneeling before him. He could have said no, taken a massive payout, and walked away a legend. But he looked into Isabella's eyes and didn't see a CEO. He saw a woman who had just shattered her own world for the sake of her word. A woman who, in her own flawed way, was trying to do the right thing. A slow smile spread across his face. That same knowing smile from the night before. He reached down, took her hand, and gently pulled her to her feet. "Yes," he said softly, "I will." The story of Elias Vance and Isabella Sterling became a legend. It wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was a story that started with prejudice and ended with respect. Theirs became a marriage, not of convenience, but of true partnership. To the shock of many, Elias turned down the executive positions he was offered. He didn't want a corner office. Instead, he created and led a new department, the Innovation from Anywhere program. It was a division dedicated to finding and nurturing genius in the most unlikely of places, in the maintenance staff, the mailroom, the security guards. He spent his days on the factory floors, listening to the people who, like him, had been invisible for far too long. Isabella changed, too. The sharp edges of her personality softened, replaced by a new kind of strength rooted in humility. She still ran her company with fierce intelligence, but now she led with her ears as much as with her voice. Together, they launched the SDX-13, an engine that incorporated dozens of ideas from the company's invisible employees. It became the most successful product in their history. Their story is a powerful reminder that a person's worth isn't defined by their job title or their uniform, but by their character and their skill. The CEO who mocked a mechanic and had to marry him didn't just find a husband. She found a better version of herself. And the mechanic who was once invisible showed the world that sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who will change everything.